Hello everybody. I am going to teach you how to trim, and basically this is after you've thrown a piece and it's stiffened up enough to where it's kind of like cheese, like a block of cheese. So when you cut it, it kind of comes off in ribbons. Um, so you flip it upside down, and usually when you throw there is a thicker bottom. So you want to thin that out and make the walls as even as the ones on top, because anytime you have a thickness that is different in the pot, it's more chance of cracking or blowing up in the kiln. So I'm on a kick wheel. That's why it's so quiet. I kick it, and then obviously it's got momentum and it stays that way. It's off center right now. So what I need to do is I need to tap it center. Otherwise, if I trim it, it'll be thin on one side and thick on the other. So I tap it until I can look down and there's no wobble. Also, what I like to do is I like to use a little Gatorade cap and I put that on top, and that way when I put pressure down to hold the pot, it distributes the pressure so it doesn't poke a hole in the center. So I try to get that centered as well. It's called a loop tool. It's a real sharp piece of metal. Take it, and as you can see, it's coming off in ribbons. And my goal is to get rid of all the excess clay and add a nice shape to the bottom so it complements the form. For a good piece of pottery, you want a nice base, a good body, a neck, and a rim. There's also a shoulder. And if you have all those things, then you have a good piece of pottery, a nice form. And so here I am, thinning out all the thick leftovers in the bottom. A lot of potters will leave it thicker on the bottom just to be sure that they don't collapse it, and then they trim it thinner later. I tend to like to throw it fairly thin. That saves you a lot of trim time. Sometimes I throw it to where it's fine just the way it is. Just smooth out the bottom, turn it over, and sign it. Now the benefit of having this mobile, to where I can just tap it. Some potters will take clay and put it down once they have it centered so it doesn't move. But I like to do it mobile so that I can pick it up, I can feel it, and I can tell where the walls are thin enough and where they're too thick. So right now I've got a pretty good job going right here, but on the bottom it's still real thick. Another thing is you can tap it, and if it's a real high pitch, then you know it's thin. If it's more of a thud, then it's on the thicker side and you trim it. Also in the center it tends to be a little thinner than the outside because of the initial push down and then pulling. So you have to be careful when you're trimming that, or you'll go right through the pot. Which isn't too bad if you do, because then you can just turn into a planter. All right, so I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna trim it a little bit more. In a previous piece, I threw a foot. Let's see if I can do this without messing up the video. And so a nice ring on the bottom kind of lifts the pot off the tabletop and gives it a nice kind of a hovering look. And it also helps to have less surface space of the pot, so that when it sits on a table, there's less chance of it scratching on a wood table. So again, I kick it, tap it, and it takes some practice to be able to do this. If you want to try it at home, I would suggest using just like a plastic bowl or something like that you can tap until you get it right. And now I'm going to work on the inside and make that foot. Start in the center, spiral out. I'm putting a little pressure on the pot so that it doesn't fly off the wheel. You can see I kind of trimmed it out, and I'm just going to trim it a little bit more. I kind of like that spiral though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth it out and then spiral it again. real pretty out here in the shade. It's a warm day, but with the breeze and in the shade, super nice. Got my friend Matt over here. He's my kung fu buddy, a neighbor, a longtime friend. He's been practicing kung fu and tai chi, and that's how we first started to strike up conversations and became friends with his father, who likes to collect pottery, so we have a lot to talk about. And now I'm just going to trim this up, and I want to make that foot nice and smooth so there's less chance of scratching the wood tabletop. So once I get it nice and rounded, I just kind of put a little bit of pressure on there. Sometimes you can use a river stone. I like to use just the smooth wood of this to compress the clay. And then, as you can see, I flattened it out and smoothed it. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add the spiral. Anything you can do to make a handmade piece of pottery and show that, better. Because mass design, you know, factory made by the thousands, just doesn't have the same feel as a one-of-a-kind handmade piece of pottery. One more little trim, and then we sign it and let it dry. We go bisque fire it, which is at a low temperature that hardens the clay enough to where it's still porous, so when we glaze it, it absorbs all the glaze better. And then we fire it to a higher temperature, which seals up the pores in the pottery, makes the glaze turn to glass, colored glass. And then you got yourself a finished, beautiful piece of pottery. All right, there's the spiral, and we're good to go. I'm gonna sign it and then fire it. Thanks for watching. I hope it inspires you. If you have any questions, just send me a little message on Facebook, and I will, or Instagram, and I'll get back to you. Have a good day.